Resources. He was elected, and started at the age of 29, ripe old age of 29. Was elected as a federal member of parliament from Calgary. Throughout his time, and later when the Conservatives had the majority, has held various portfolios in ministers, starting out as the Minister of Multicultural Affairs, also Minister of Citizenship and Integration Canada, Minister of Employment and Social Development, and then Minister of National Defense, among others, during his time there, and then returned home, and as of this last April was elected and became the Premier of Alberta.
How did you memorize all that?
I've known you for a long time. Likewise, seated to your right is the Premier of Ontario, Doug Ford. As we were talking earlier today and meeting with a number of businesses here, the Premier spent most of his life as a business leader and a business owner, including having operations here in the United States, so truly understands the cross-border space and the issues that confront our businesses, the things that keep you up at night, both in terms of opportunities and challenges. He then pursued the other family business where he is part of a three-generation public servant in the Ford family. He was a city councillor in Toronto, where, and part of the many hats that he wore was balancing the books of that great city. And we've heard a lot about Toronto and the various metropolitan regions. But getting the books right was a critical part of his role. And then, as many of you know, over the last year and change, was elected and became the Premier of Ontario. And so please join me in welcoming both of the premiers here for our fireside chat. We'll see if they're clapping at the end. So starting with you, Premier Ford, welcome back to Ohio. I know you've been here a number of times in your life, and this is your next-door neighbor in Ontario. Most of us in Ohio, of course, have been to great places like Niagara Falls. I don't think there was anybody married in the 70s here in Ohio that didn't go to Niagara Falls for their honeymoon. Many of us visit the fabulous metropolis of Toronto. But what else is there in Ontario that you would like all of us here, not only in Ohio, but throughout North America, to know about that great province?
Well, I'll tell you, Ontario is an incredible place, not only to do business, but also to live. And I see some of the folks that we did the roundtable with earlier, so I apologize if I repeat a lot of the great things that Ontario has to offer. First of all, for the people of Ohio here, we're Ohio's number one customer. We do $23 billion a year with Ohio to a trade. There's 300,000 jobs here in Ohio that rely on the trade with Ontario. And as a province, we're the number one trading partner to 19 states, and we're number two to 9 other states. And I always say if Ontario was a standalone country, we'd be the third largest trading partner in the world when it comes to Ontario, with over $300 billion US in trade. And if you think of it, and you ask the average person, business owner, business manager, about Ontario, they wouldn't realize that combined, we do more business than China, Japan, UK, totally combined. So we do a tremendous amount of business. We're one of the most diversified regions in North America. No matter if it's high tech, we're in the top 10 when it comes to high tech regions in the world. Silicon Valley of the North, as we like to say, and mining, one of the largest mining sectors in the entire world. I think number 2 next to New York in the financial sector. But we cover everything right across the board, no matter if it's, as I said, mining, agriculture. We're an economic powerhouse when it comes to North America. We have 14.5 million people. Some of the brightest people in the entire world are living in Ontario. We graduate over 42,000 students out of colleges and universities every single year, and that's one of our largest assets, are the people and the diversity. Not only more on the multicultural side, as the Premier knows, because you were in charge of that portfolio federally, but economically as well. We went into office, it was a total financial mess. We had the largest sub-sovereign debt in the entire world at $347 billion. The previous administration that was in office for 15 years doubled the debt. As I always say, we're paying $1.5 million an hour, $36 million a day, and $13.3 billion a year in just servicing that debt. It's the fourth largest line item, but in less than a year, a little over a year now, as the previous administration lost 300,000 manufacturing jobs, we've created the environment to create 230,000 new jobs. And I always say government doesn't create jobs, we create the environment to create jobs by cutting red tape and regulations. We're cutting 25% of the regulations by 2020. We're lowering taxes. We're putting Ontario job and investment incentive together that saves companies over $3.8 billion. So far, we've saved companies over $5 billion. And again, it's getting unleashing companies until they can grow. Get the government out of the way. Nothing's worse when the government is sitting there like the nanny state telling you how to run your business, what you can do, what you can't do. I think businesses are great stewards of their own industry. They're held accountable by the people in the market themselves. But I could go on for an hour, but I don't want to steal all the time here. I don't want to steal all Jason's time because, one of our closest allies is Alberta. And I'll let Jason speak about the energy file, which is absolutely critical, not just to Ontario, but all of Canada and North America. It's mind-boggling how we're importing 700,000 barrels a day from, very frankly, from countries that don't see eye to eye with us all the time. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. We have all the oil we need right next door, but we have to start building these pipelines and getting it to market. And our federal government doesn't see eye to eye with a lot of the premiers. Our whole country almost went blue. I know down here Republicans are red. Up in Canada we're blue, the Conservatives, and there's just been a clean sweep right across the country for the most part, vast majority of it.
Well, in that vein, Premier Kenney, I know that you were just in, Alberta and Ohio, we don't touch borders, but you were just in northwestern Ohio and saw, most folks that are from outside of the state may not know that John D. Rockefeller's first refinery was in Lima, Ohio. It's a legendary place here in the state, the Lima refinery, which is now owned and operated by Husky, which is a great Canadian company. There are pipelines likely underneath this building that are Enbridge or TC, TransCanada pipelines. So there are those physical linkages beyond the economic and social, cultural linkages between our great state and your province. I'll ask you the same question that I asked Premier Ford. What would you like the folks here? No, we heard some great things yesterday. The Edmonton team, the folks from Calgary and others have just been doing a great job of promoting the province here. But what would be some of the things that you would want others, not only here in Ohio, but beyond, to know as well?
Well, first, thanks to you, Dan, and to NASCO for the invite. Great to be on the stage with my friend Doug, who has been a tremendous ally of Alberta. And he and I are in a healthy competition for jobs, growth, and investment. And we want to be partners with all of the businesses and interests represented in this room that's done so much to lead the way on North American prosperity. Albertans very much have the spirit of trading people. Our whole history is trading historically in commodities, and that still is the dominant share of our economy, but increasingly in areas like information technology, and we are very plugged into the innovation economy. The central problem, I think, in the Canada-U.S. and North American trading relationship is how so many of us take these relationships for granted. I think the vast majority of Albertans would be shocked to know that our trade with the state of Ohio, for example, is larger than that of our trade with every country on earth, save the United States generally and China. So $9.2 billion of trade between the state of Ohio and the province of Alberta, even though we are not too close geographically. That just underscores the importance of that. Now, most of that would, at least on the Alberta side, of course, energy exports lead the way. We export about $100 billion worth of goods and services to the United States, and that's about 70% energy. As you know, the United States is very dependent on Canadian energy. And I think what happened in Saudi Arabia last weekend underscores the enormous value of having a safe, reliable, democratic source of energy with, by the way, the third largest oil reserves on Earth. There's Venezuela, Saudi, then Alberta. And while we are continuously improving our environmental performance in the extraction and development of energy, when we look at questions like environmental and social governance, ESG, we have to look at the whole spectrum there. On the E, we're shrinking carbon intensity. We've done that by about 30% on an average barrel of oil sands, bitumen. We're on track to reduce it by another 20%. And I would be delighted to go head-to-head on the S, social metrics, against any OPEC country or Russia. Because I know that Canada knocks the lights out on any fair, objective comparison for responsible sources of energy production. So in a world where we're consuming 110 million barrels per day, and that's projected to go up, we think it's in the interests of the United States, in particular, to deepen that. But so on top of that, though, we've got a lot of amazing advantages. And then why was I up in Northwest Ohio yesterday? It was to visit, as you said, one of the refineries, in fact, the Husky has one, the Lima refinery, but BP and Husky are in a joint venture at another refinery in Toledo that, just to give you one example, brings in about 60,000 barrels a day of heavy crude from Alberta and about another 10,000 or so of light crude coming out of Line 5. And they told me they're keen, they want more. They could go up to 80,000 barrels a day of Alberta crude. Or heavy crude. Just to put this in perspective, that one refinery is buying about $1 billion of Alberta energy every year, which is 10 times our total annual trade with Brazil. So my message to Canadians is, let's not forget how essential these relationships are. But on top of the energy, energy, because of the huge investments, has spun off a growing tech sector, innovation sector, a lot of it in the energy and environment space. But also, I think you heard from Edmonton Global yesterday about exciting things that are happening with artificial intelligence and machine learning. The AMI lab in Edmonton is rated as the third top artificial intelligence lab on Earth. There are 60 companies in that space in Alberta. And we're, with our government cutting business taxes by 1/3, cutting red tape by 1/3. We're outdoing you, Doug. Let's get into a competition on this. With super inexpensive AAA modern office space in downtown Calgary, which was just voted for the third straight year by The Economist as the most livable city in North America. Eat your heart out, Toronto. This is a place to do business, and we want to do that with our NAFTA partners.
Thank you. I do want to note, too, that we discovered just a little bit before this is the first time the premiers have ever been on a panel together, not only in the United States, but in Canada as well. So we're going to see how the healthy competition goes along the way here. Let me just build off of that question, and I'd like to ask you the same, Premier Ford. Just from your vantage point in those various portfolios that you managed, looking around the world, right? We're talking a lot about, but you've mentioned Saudi Arabia and Venezuela and things of that nature. How do you see overall our competitiveness together versus, our relationship with each other in Canada, U.S., North America, and then that vis-a-vis the rest of the world? What we're doing, and more importantly, what they're doing that we may not be in the rest of the world, if you follow me in the sense of the rest of the world, we've got away with benign neglect for a while in Canada, U.S., and the rest of the world ain't waiting around anymore. Just from your vantage point, is that a sentiment that you would agree with, not agree with? Where do you want to go from there?
Well, yes, I would. I just reflect on that in my own domestic context in Alberta. We had a lot of very good years with high commodity prices, with our thriving energy economy until roughly 2015. And because of those good years, we lost our edge. And we allowed a gradual layering of regulatory complexity to burden our economy. And that stuff happens incrementally and almost imperceptibly. When we now look at it, though, it turns out that our approval timelines for projects is about 4 to 5 times longer than it is amongst our primary competitors in places like Texas and Colorado. And so, this is as academics call it, the the problems of complex societies or the cultural contradictions of capitalism. You get prosperous and then you start to lose your competitive edge, as developing countries very much have that edge. So that's why we have launched our red tape reduction strategy to reduce by 1/3 the number of regulatory requirements imposed by the government of Alberta, to accelerate our approvals, to meet the best-in-class standard in North America while maintaining the highest standards in terms of environmental protection and workplace safety, for example. Another thing we have to watch out for, obviously, we used to talk all at post 9/11 in this relationship about the thickening of the border. Well, there's very much a thickening of the border when it comes to importing Canadian energy into the United States. It's interesting. One of the core issues in NAFTA was guaranteeing American access to the third largest oil reserves on Earth up in Canada. And now what do we have? We're in our 9th year of delays on Keystone XL that would bring 850,000 barrels a day of reliable, democratic energy to the Gulf states. And we have regulatory delays on Line 3, which is the single largest source of energy coming into the United States off the Enbridge main line. And we have an Attorney General in Michigan who is trying to decommission Line 5 that brings 540,000 barrels of energy into the upper Great Lakes, the upper Midwest. That would be, if that happened, would be devastating to the economy of this region, to gas prices, to heating your homes with propane in the Michigan Peninsula, to aviation fuel costs at Detroit Airport, Pittsburgh Airport. So I guess my pitch, we want to say what other countries in the world are building pipelines. They're building capacity. When I go to India, Prime Minister Modi says, when are we going to get your natural gas? So we Canadians have to fix some of our own regulatory problems, but we would call upon our American friends to help us do the same to ensure continental energy security.
That's wonderful. And Premier Ford, you touched on this earlier in the roundtable with businesses, just this idea of being more competitive within the North American space, and particularly Canada, U.S. Can you expand on that as well in terms of what our businesses should be doing together? Basically, we're in this together. We're making things together. We're innovating together. But what do we need to do to keep that momentum going?
Well, I'm a strong believer in relationship building is getting down to the individual states. I've met with 24 governors already and building a relationship. So we can talk to the governor of Michigan, and it's absolutely critical, this Line 5. I can't emphasize it enough, not to mention economically. But I think, as Minister Rickford at the round table, it's a security issue. When you start shutting down airports, no matter if it's Detroit or Toronto or Pittsburgh, it becomes a security issue. So it's absolutely critical. Line 5 never gets shut down. But moving forward, we have to take this protectionism mentality, buy America away. I get it, and it's no disrespect, as I said at the round table, to China, no disrespect to any other country, but Canada is different than any other country. We're your largest trading partner, one of the largest, closest ally, largest unprotected border in the world. Canadians look at the United States as their big brother. And the old saying in Canada is, when the U.S. sneezes, Canada catches a cold. I would love to see an exemption for Ontario, be it Alberta, as well, and have, if you truly want fair and free trade, and there's 3 million jobs at stake just with the Ontario trade here in the United States, not in Canada or in Ontario, but it affects 3 million people. We're the largest automotive manufacturer in North America, Ontario. As people think Michigan, it's actually Ontario. We produce over 2 million cars. And within those 2 million cars, parts can travel back and forth between the border 8 times before it gets assembled. Might get assembled in Ontario, might get assembled here in Ohio or Michigan. So, God bless the president. And don't get me wrong, full disclosure, I'm a big Republican. I'm a supporter, conservative-minded, and Jason's probably more conservative than I am. But, this protectionism, it's just not going to work. We have more natural resources, in Canada than probably any jurisdiction that I know anywhere in the world. Sheer economic power of the United States. When we work together, we're unstoppable. We aren't competing against the guy down the street any longer. We're competing against India. We're competing against China, and other regions. What better partners that are just intertwined? We share the same values. We share the same values of hard work, share the same values of faith and family, and we're connected. So
I obviously agree with Doug on the importance of trade. I would just say we got to do the same thing within the 10 provinces of Canada.
Yeah, absolutely.
We lose estimates between $40 and $80 billion of GDP per annum because of internal trade barriers to labor mobility. And I hope that we'll see, not just talk, but real action from the provincial governments and whoever wins this federal election. I hope federal leadership as well to help us get true free trade within Canada.
Jason made a very, very good point. It's I know it's hard to believe, but it's easier to trade with the U.S. than it is with Alberta right now. And in a lot of cases, in anywhere from $50 billion going right towards our GDP. So we need to fix our own problems, and we're well on our way doing that. We have a great group of premiers right across this province, right across this country, and we just look forward to working with our greatest allies in the world.
Well, that's a great point, Premier Ford. When you think about all the things that you all have already said and are doing, it's action oriented, getting things done. The reality is, and I hate to tell you this, and more importantly your staff's this, is from a business perspective, the way that the world is working, more and more responsibility are going to fall on our provinces, states, and municipal governments, because we can talk about autonomous vehicles. We have the smartest intersection in the world here in central Ohio, largely because of Honda, their presence here, autonomous vehicles. But it's a city and a municipality and a state that has to figure out how to regulate all of that. And, it's how do you get down? I mean, obviously there's federal regulations, but when somebody makes a left turn down the wrong way, or who's got to build the streets wide enough, and all of those types of things. And you look at regulatory cooperation, all of these behind the border issues. So the list just keeps piling on. And there's more, but yet there's more opportunities for states and provinces to work together. Now that you're working domestically, you've been a strong advocate on the Canada-U.S. side. What can a province like Ontario and then a province like Alberta do to really start to change that narrative where we're getting work done at the state and provincial levels to fix Canada-U.S. in North America? What would be some of the strategies that you're looking to deploy and employ in that regard?
Well, it's no different here than it is in Canada. We don't always see eye to eye with Ottawa, and I know the states don't always see eye to eye with Washington. But again, breaking down the hurdles and all the roadblocks that we face, we should again have truly open and free and fair trade, and our economies will continue to boom. Our tax rate the marginal tax rate in Ontario, we dropped it down to 12.6. The average marginal tax rate in the United States is 18.7%. So again, reduce taxes, cut regulations. Our economy is booming to the point, and I know it's happening here as well, and I'm sure it is in Alberta, but we don't have enough people to fill all the jobs. We've created the environment for 230,000 new jobs, so we're short another 250,000 people that we need. And that's, by the way, that's skilled and unskilled. I had Amazon walk in my office not long ago and said we're building I believe it's our fourth 1 million square foot building. We need 600 people unskilled, and we don't have them. So now they're running ads on radio and on television just to hire people on trades as well. It's absolutely critical. We focus on trades. Our economy is absolutely on fire. To give you an example, Toronto alone has more cranes in the air than New York, Boston, Chicago, Dallas combined. And if you haven't been to Toronto, come by, and it's an incredible city.
On Doug's point, obviously we hope that Congress will move forward with ratification of CUSMA, USMCA. I do, however, think it is unfortunate that the agreement does not include much ambition on labor mobility. And that's, I think, Doug's point. You get in a huge economy like North America's, you get regional cycles, and it would be better for everyone if I think we could facilitate labor mobility. Right now, we have a jobs crisis in Alberta for a number of reasons. But 7 years ago, we were facing the number one concern was a labor and skills shortage. At that time, the economy was soft in many parts of the American Midwest. At that time, it would have been helpful for short-term projects, bring up, for example, tradespeople from the United States. And now there's a lot of Canadians working in Texas and Colorado and North Dakota in the Permian and Bakken to feed their families. So I do hope that policymakers will keep an eye on the importance of labor mobility. That's also why the government of Alberta we are now studying the possibility of unilaterally recognizing trade and professional certification across the Canadian Federation, rather than spending years negotiating and the excruciating details of reciprocal mobility agreements. Just get her done is the Alberta attitude, and that's leading our trade strategy.
There's no question. As a law firm that represents Canada-U.S. companies, it's the biggest challenge we face, is moving bodies between Canada and the United States. It's shocking that it is challenging as it is. Now, we can assist companies doing it, but if they know to get there. But the disincentive when a CEO goes to the border and gets turned around for frankly, it's ridiculous.
You know something, I hate to jump in here, but that actually happened to me once before I was in politics. We have a facility in Chicago creating jobs, and one in Toronto, and just crossing the border. You think you're committing a crime by just crossing the border, and the interrogation you get was absolutely staggering. Again, we're job creators, and people should be able, if they want to make a sales call from our Toronto facility down to our Chicago facility, making sure that the person's getting paid in Canadian dollars and so on and so forth, should be able to make a day trip without any harassment. And that's a big issue with a lot of businesses if you talk to them. Big issue in the borders. And I'm a massive supporter of our Border Patrol, by the way, but we need to have a better measurement.
And it makes their job easier, too, if we have a better system,
absolutely.
Right? They can focus on what they need to be focused on. In that vein, as we start to wind down here, I know it's very difficult in your roles to have the opportunity to take a longer view, right? It's the issues of the day at this point, more often than not. But I'm testing kind of prognostication skills here and looking ahead. We're not going to get into the Stanley Cup. I don't want to get a brawl going on here on stage, and we're in Columbus. We'll host you, but we'll have you back when we're in the playoffs again this year in Columbus. Maybe there'll be a Canadian team this time.
But wherever the team is from, the majority of players will be from Canada, so we're good.
That's wonderful. In that vein, looking 5 years out, I mean, there's very ambitious agendas. As I said earlier, there's action items behind all of those. But starting with you, Premier Kenney, if looking at Canada, U.S., and maybe in the broader context of North America 5 years from now, if you could have that wish list, you've laid many pieces and components of it, but what is that vision? Where would we be in 5 years from now in a perfect world?
Well, where I hope it to be and where it will be, the latter depends a lot on the outcome of elections. On the former, let me just say, I hope we're in a situation where we've had USMCA ratified, where the nascent revival, the revival of protectionism in the American Congress has diminished and abided, where we've solved the never-ending softwood lumber dispute, and where Keystone XL is delivering 850,000 barrels of Alberta energy to U.S. refineries that can help permanently displace dictator oil from Venezuela, and where we have the Line 3 replacement delivering plus 380,000 barrels per day to Pad 2 and the U.S. Midwest as a reliable and affordable source of energy, and where Enbridge has been allowed to replace bury Line 5 under the Straits of Mackinac to secure the energy supply of the upper Midwest. Those are particular things I hope we see within 5 years. And certainly for my province, I hope that we see that we continue the gradual path towards economic diversification based in part on being a great trading partner, not only with the United States, but also with Mexico. And in the Canadian context, I hope we've led the way with the same ambition. You know, you all know, one of the great things, economic advantages of Canada is being the great trade cloud with NAFTA, USMCA, CETA, TPP, 1.5 billion people, 52 countries. And I think you had Stephen Harper here a couple of days ago. He's responsible for a good chunk of that. We want to continue to leverage on that. Let's do the same internally within Canada. So much shared values, shared interests. We've been through a lot in the past 20 years. Since the 9/11 era, we've worked through a lot of really challenging issues. But right now, I'm concerned that there's reverse momentum in North American economic cooperation. And we need leadership from those of you in this room to turn that back into positive momentum for the sake of all of our people.
Premier Ford?
Well, in 5 years, first of all, for the sake of Alberta and Ontario, I hope we both get reelected. So we'll get back there. But, I just want to echo what the Premier was saying and make sure that we ratify the USMCA deal. We have oil flowing freely to all markets, to the refineries. We have one of the largest refineries out in New Brunswick, and we can't get our oil from Alberta.
They're paying more for their imports from Saudi right now for obvious reasons. How does this make any sense? And we've got the third largest reserves on Earth.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense at all. There's a little pit stop in Quebec, but that's a whole other issue we can talk about. But have a true fair and free deal trading between all countries rather than Buy America. Why don't we call it Buy North America? Again, I look at especially Canada and the U.S. We're competing. I go back to what I said earlier. We're competing against China. We're competing against India. We're competing against countries in Europe. So if we stay united, we work together and work on the strengths of each country, then again we're unstoppable, and I'm confident we'll get there. I really am.
Well, that is a potentially perfect ending point for this discussion. So in that vein, we are at that magic hour, but if I can ask the audience to join me in thanking you for being here at the NASCO. And just so that you are aware that we did make a donation on behalf of NASCO to the Mid-Ohio Food Bank on behalf of all of our speakers that are attending here today. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, folks. Please come visit Toronto. The Rocky Mountains are way more impressive out now.